Yanni, I'm going to start out tonight by dating myself a little bit. There's a song by the group Kross, which for you youngsters who do not know Kross, you might want to go look them up. Some high fashion sense. They had a song called Tonight's the Night. It was not referring to football analysis, but for me, Yanni, tonight's the night as we get to the NFC North. My Vikings division, but also a fun division to break down. How are you feeling about this one?
I thought we were going to warm it up. I didn't know where you were going.
We could do that too. We definitely could do that too.
It is the night for your Vikings. And I'm sure we'll get into it here, but this is, I think, the trickiest division of all 8 here to really, really get into. And I'm excited. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. Well, let's jump right in then. We'll go in alphabetical order as always, which means we're starting out with the Chicago Bears, who got rid of Justin Fields, had the number 1 pick, brought in Caleb Williams. Matt Eberflus is back. They do have new coordinators in Shane Waldron on offense and Eric Washington on defense. Be interested to see if you know anything about Eric Washington since he's coming from Buffalo. I knew nothing. 7-10 last year, and for me, I have them as having the 28th ranked schedule. So one of the easier schedules in the league this year. When you look at this Bears team, Yanni, a lot of hype around them. They brought in something. We'll talk about it through free agency. Obviously, Caleb Williams coming in is a big deal. Does Chicago have reason to be excited?
They definitely have, I would say, more reason to be excited than they've had in a long time. You started, and I think it's a great place to start, is with the coordinators there. And there's a lot of unknowns on this Bears team, but I think the coordinators, probably start there. I mean, this is a defense that was playing well last year, played very well, actually. And, like you said, what do you get with the new coordinator there? I don't know a whole lot. I tried to do a little bit of research on Eric Washington. Just, obviously I know the name from being with the Bills, but, I don't know what that means. And I don't know that anybody knows what that means at this point. Same thing with Shane Waldron. I mean, we'll see what that does. I think that offense needed, an infusion of something. Now, whether or not that ends up being a good infusion or bad, time will tell on that. But, so often these conversations come back to the quarterback position. And Justin Fields, who knows? We still don't know if he's got a future in this league. He'll probably get a shot at some point, whether that's in Pittsburgh or elsewhere. We'll see about that. But it's obviously the Caleb Williams show at this point. And here's what we know. He has a lot of help around him. And this roster is actually when you compare this roster to 2 years ago, I mean, 2 years ago, this was a really bad roster. I mean, one of the worst, in my opinion, in the league. And now you fast forward to today, and it's like, wow, they've got talent kind of all over the place. And there aren't a lot of glaring weaknesses there. I mean, when I look at this team, if you want to poke some holes in it, the interior of the defensive line may be a little bit unknown there, but they were really good against the run last year. I think their average gave up 3.7 yards per carry. So, I mean, they were pretty stout as it was. So we'll see. On the offensive side, I mean, this is a team that struggled on the offensive line for the last 5, 6, 7 seasons, really. This is the best offensive line I think that they've had, in the last 6 or 7 years. Now, I still don't know that it's an elite type of offensive line when you look at the players there, but it's definitely not a horrible weakness like I feel like it was. So, when you kind of grade some of those quarterbacks that came in, whether that was a Mitch Trubisky or a Justin Fields or whoever you want to look at that the Bears have trotted out there, it was a tough assignment, right? I mean, not a lot of blocking in front of them, not a lot of weapons. Now, all of a sudden, the offensive line is a little bit repaired. They're deep at the running back position. I don't know that they have any studs at the running back position, but they got 3 capable guys that have proven they can play in this league. At running back. And then, of course, you look at the skill positions and, they've got a trio that's right up there with the best in the league now, assuming, of course, that the rookie Roma Odunze, we'll see what happens with him. But if they can get another year or 2 out of Keenan Allen and pair him with DJ Moore, I mean, all of a sudden, this is good. And don't forget, too, Cole Kmet came on big at the end of last year. He was playing some good football, and they brought in Gerald Everett, a nice depth piece there on the offensive side. So, there aren't a lot of weaknesses when you look at this team. That Montez Sweat addition, I think, could be huge. I think he's going to have the type of season that kind of mirrors a TJ Watt, a Nick Bosa, that kind of a type season. And if he does, when you look at kind of what's around him at the linebacker position, I mean, Jalen Johnson is arguably the top corner in the league. I mean, he's in the conversation, in my opinion. So you start looking there and it's like, man, where are the weaknesses? So it all comes back to this to me again. What are we getting from the quarterback position here? We don't know. I don't claim to be one of those big draft guys. I mean, obviously I knew the hype of Caleb Williams coming into last year and, obviously heading into the draft. I can tell you this, the Bears have certainly never proven that they can get the quarterback position right. So, you kind of have, you have to ask, well, what does it mean for this year? Did they finally get it right? Maybe. We'll see. What I do know is they're probably going to give the keys to the number one pick here with a lot of help around him. So we'll learn pretty quickly if he's the guy. And I mean, obviously we've seen some of the talent that he has in college, but we also saw him middle a little bit in the pack, whatever it's called now. I don't even know what it's called out west there. So
there's none of it left. It's
whatever's left, whatever it was called, whatever
formerly known as the Pac-12.
Yeah, whatever the former Pac-12 is, whatever it's called. So, I'm a little concerned because this is one of those situations where it's like this Bears team has to feel some confidence going in, which they probably haven't felt for a while. But how much pressure is on Caleb Williams? How does he handle that pressure? Can they set him up to be successful by utilizing the weapons, not asking him to do a whole lot, that kind of a thing? Again, CJ Stroud was an anomaly. I mean, yes, we get those Cam Newton rookie seasons. We get a Joe Burrow type situation. That does happen, but more often than not, it doesn't. So I'm not expecting Caleb Williams to come in and be CJ Stroud, even though he has a lot more help, I think, than CJ Stroud had a year ago. So I'm going to say this. I look at where they're at here. 8.5 win total is roughly where we've got them, right? Give or take here. I think, for me, as crazy as it sounds, because this roster is really good, I don't know that they get there. The only thing that to me is saving them and putting them in the conversation for a division title, for going over a win total, is the fact that you mentioned it. I have them as the third easiest schedule in the league. And when you compare that to the rest of the NFC North, which I'm sure we will here, there's a big gap there. It's not like, all these teams are playing a similar schedule. On paper, the Bears have the easiest path to getting wins of anyone there. So if Caleb Williams can come in and play well, the ceiling on this team is very high. And I think we could say that probably about all four teams in this conference or in this division, obviously. But I think their ceiling is extremely high. But I'm going to be honest with you. The Bears organization to me is a colossal failure. And I don't know, maybe I'm just paranoid from the previous decade plus whatever.
Yeah.
Because it sure looks like they got it together. I mean, I love the Keenan Allen addition, that veteran presence. He was still playing at a high level, but, when he was healthy last year. Obviously, the pick of Roma Dunze there. I mean, this is some good stuff. That defense could be really good again. But I'm going to pump the brakes on them here. I am not all in on the Bears. I know a lot of people are saying you need to pound that win total over. I'm not there. So I'm curious to hear where you are on them.
Well, you hit a lot of the points that I agree with. I did drop my duties there, and it is 8.5. You're right, but it is shaded to the, or not even shaded to the over. It's up minus 150 to the over, so it's way over right now. Plus 145 to the under, plus 350 to win the division. I could reiterate a lot of the things that you said. I know that's not really worth it, but let me just say generally, I love this offense, and Caleb Williams is the question. And I know that you said that, but I just think that it's so true. I don't think Caleb Williams has to be CJ Stroud for this offense to be really good. This is a team that was able to run the ball some last year. They brought in DeAndre Swift without losing Roschon Johnson. I think they're going to be able to run the ball again. Like you said, the offensive line is better, and not only are they better, but they did add some depth as well, both in free agency and in the draft. So we talked about this with some other teams where, yes, you look at the starting five, but you also wonder, is there anyone capable behind that starting five? And I think, not that they've got like 10 guys back there, but I think they've got like 3 other guys that can come in and be decent linemen if they have a few injuries. So I think they could weather that a little bit, which is a great thing. Then you have DJ Moore and Keenan Allen, who both are really good at getting open, which is a really nice thing for a young quarterback, where maybe he doesn't have to throw into quite as tight of windows as you usually have to in the NFL. Now, it's still going to be harder than college. Like, obviously, you're stepping up to the NFL. But this is one of the things I really loved about Keenan Allen is, as this professional veteran receiver, is he maybe going to lose some of his speed? Yeah, sure, maybe. But he's a good route runner, and he creates some space. And so I think that he's going to be able to get open for Caleb Williams. Yeah, and then Roma Dunze. I mean, honestly, to me, Roma Dunze, if he can be like a big play threat, I mean, he's going to get sometimes maybe like the third cornerback on him. And so he's going to have this like lower level matchup. And then Cole Kmet and Gerald Everett. I just think like you take that whole group together, what do you do? Because that's 5 really good offensive weapons, not to mention that they're able to run the ball. So to me, I look at this as an offense that at least has the potential to be one of those where the quarterback just has to be kind of average. Now, Caleb Williams could end up turning the ball over a ton, trying to do too much, all that stuff. And that's where I think the offensive scheme is going to be important. But if they can like let him ease into the season, talking about the easier schedule too, the schedule's spread out a little bit, but they start with Tennessee at home. Shouldn't be a terribly, I mean, Tennessee might not be horrific, but it's not a great team. Then they have to go to Houston. That's tough. But then Indy, the Rams, pretty good. Carolina, Jacksonville, Washington, Arizona. You got 4 weeks in a row there with 4 of the worst teams in the league. New England after that. So I think like some of their more difficult parts of their schedule are stacked toward the end of the year too, where maybe Caleb Williams gets a chance to work into the season a little bit.
Yeah.
In addition, what you said about the defense, I disagree. I think this is a defense that has a chance to be really good. They went, so in the first 11 games last year, they averaged minus 5.77 expected points on defense. Montez Sweat came in, and in the last 5, they averaged plus 9.85. So it was a swing of 15 points expected from defensive production. Now, I don't expect him to be as good as that high number, but the point is that this defense probably isn't going to be at that negative number either. I mean, this is probably a defense that's giving you a positive points expected in most games this season. Yeah, so they're going to keep you in games.
Yeah, and it's fair to point out, not to cut you off there, but you know that early season Bears defense had a lot of injuries, guys like Jalen Johnson and that. So I think to your point, you know, Montez Sweat was kind of the key lever there, bringing in a legitimate end and pass rusher that they desperately needed. But they also got some guys back in the second half of the year there that, you know, they were playing without early on. So I think that, you know, but again, that just lends the fact that they probably are going to be pretty good.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's absolutely. The other thing that I'll add here, just another layer, is just the turnover stuff again. So they had 25 turnovers last year. I mean, Justin Fields, you loved Justin Fields. We'll get to talk about him later, Yanni. Don't be sad. But turnover machine. Yes, he can make big plays. They were only 0.27 wins under expectation based on turnovers. So they were right about even. They made up for those. They had 26 takeaways. They actually had a positive turnover differential.
Yeah, positive.
Yeah. I mean, imagine if you had a quarterback. Again, I'm going back to a similar thing here. Imagine if you have a quarterback who just takes care of the ball and like does what he needs to do and doesn't try to do too much. Can Caleb Williams do that? I don't know. But I really think we're looking at a team that needs average quarterback play to be pretty good. The other thing I'll say in terms of the organization, because I think you bring up a great point. We talked about this last year with the Lions some, right? Where you have these historically bad organizations. Can they ever really turn it around? And it seems like it takes a really long time and is really hard to do, even when you bring in good players. So I'm just saying that I think it is worth naming that. But also we have the Lions as an example of an organization where they did turn it around. I'm not sure if Matt Eberflus is the guy to lead that or not. You know, that's a spot when we get to ranking coaches later. You know, I'm not pumped that with the coaching staff here. Yeah. And that's a negative to me. But I will say big picture, and we'll get to talking about where we expect these teams, or not even where we expect them to finish, maybe where we'll pick them to finish, because I think we both think there's a lot of different things that could happen this year. I think this team, I am in that. So I started out with looking at their free agency and their draft picks, and I was like, oh, this team's going to be good. And then I heard that a lot of places, which always makes me pump the brakes. And I'm like, okay, let's not get too excited, because if everybody else is excited, I probably shouldn't be. Man, the more time I've spent with this team, I just think if Caleb Williams is average, this team is going to be good. And I'm not saying oh, they're the front runner for the division. I don't mean that, but I just mean we'll talk about these teams coming up. I'm not sure that I see a huge material difference between them and the Lions or the Packers if Caleb Williams is average. So
yeah,
that's where I'm at with them.
Fair, man. Honestly, I think if you said out of the 32 teams in the league, whose expected win total, I'm going to use the word again, has the highest ceiling, I mean, you could certainly say it's the Bears. I mean, if this team went 12-5, would you be shocked?
No.
I wouldn't either. I wouldn't either. Now, do I think that's going to happen? No, but I wouldn't be like, oh, there's no way that's going to happen. Like if you said, I think this team's going 12-5, I'd say, you know what, it might happen. So I think, we use that floor ceiling a lot, but I mean, this is a team, like you said, they could be really good.
Yeah. So I look at wins a couple different ways in terms of projections. I do one that's more like fractional, what percentage chance do I give them in every game? And then one that's takes in variance into account a little bit more with like a floor and a ceiling. I haven't bet this, especially with the line. I have them at 9.22 wins, but floor and ceiling wise, I have them between 8 and 14. And maybe that's a little high, but as I go through these games, I'm like, how many of these games do I really think for me, the middle is, do you have between a 40 and 60% chance of winning? Sure. I don't think there are many games where they're not in that range.
And I mean, you read off a chunk of their schedule there. Okay, they won't be favored at Houston. They probably won't be favored against the Rams, but a lot of those games they're going to be favored. So, again, you kind of look at that there and say, well, if you're purely, this was what I meant, and I meant to write this down and I did not, and I forgot, but I wanted to say, if you're purely if you are a scientific bettor, if that's a such thing, the Bears are your team. I think the numbers add up there. I'm not always a scientific bettor, right? I tend to go a little bit on my own in my own crazy directions. And that's why I'm not pouncing on this Bears line. But there are a lot of people that are very high, understandably, on this team. I mean, people that I know I respect that are like, this team's going to win 11 games. And I'm like, they certainly could. I mean, they certainly could.
Yeah. Yeah, it's it's always the variance, right? I mean, I think if the Bears come in especially significantly under, if they only get to 6 or 7 wins, I think it's a bad season for Caleb Williams.
For sure.
So all right, well, interesting start there with the Bears. I think overall relatively aligned on what we think about them. Next, we move on to last year's division winners, the no longer lowly Detroit Lions. Dan Campbell back for his 4th year. Ben Johnson comes back, which was a big deal because he was expected to be lost to a head coaching position, but he decided to stick around. Aaron Glenn comes back on defense as well, which there's some stability here, right? This is an organization that's created some stability, which they definitely have not always had. 12-5 last year, very, very close to making the Super Bowl. I have them strength of schedule as 11th. For me, and then in terms of the over-under, it's set at 10.5, and actually, again, this is best lines available. You can get plus 100 on either side of that 10.5, plus 150 to win the division. So obviously, the Lions are the favorite to win this division again. Yanni, is that warranted?
Yeah, I think they've earned it. So yes. Now, is that going to be a cakewalk? Absolutely not. I think that, first of all, I guess we didn't really talk overall about these lines, but I feel like the Lions, the Packers, the Bears, I do feel like these lines are too far apart. I feel that these three teams in particular, and for what it's worth, I feel your Vikings are a little far apart as well. I think all of these teams should be a little closer in terms of the division odds. So, with saying that, I don't see a lot of value in playing the Lions. Now, do I think they've earned the right to be the favorite? And can you make a case for them to be the favorite? Absolutely. So I have no problem with that at all. But I also don't think there's value in betting them. When I look at this here and you're essentially getting just a little bit better than even money for them winning the division, way too tough. No value there whatsoever. Win total, maybe. I think you mentioned, you said that you had them as the 11th toughest schedule.
I had 11th toughest.
I have them as 10th. So, I mean,
Okay.
we're pretty close there.
Close, yeah.
So, again, a much harder road than the Bears, certainly, as far as getting there. They've got some gauntlet on the schedule they got to get through there. But here's what I would say, when you look last year, they were 14-6 against the spread, which is really good. I mean, 70%. I mean, that, that's as good as it gets. And I feel like from a betting standpoint, there's going to be a little bit of regression there, right? I mean, it's kind of natural because last year, it's the Lions. Like, yeah, they're winning, but it's the Lions, right? So, you kind of had a little bit of an undervalued team. Now, all of a sudden, they're the favorites to win the division, and you wonder, okay, maybe we went a little bit, the pendulum swung a little bit too far the other direction here, which is what I think happened. But let's start with this, though. There is so much to like about this team, and you nailed it. I think the consistency is huge, getting their coordinators back. Really, their roster is very consistent. Yep. They didn't have a lot of change on their roster, and I think if anything, this roster is probably a piece or two better than it was a year ago when you add a DJ Reader in there. I mean, with DJ Reader and Aleem McNeil in the middle there, you're not running on this team. I mean, I'm telling you that. I don't think you're running on this team, which means guys like Aiden Hutchinson and that can really try to, get that pass rush going, which they need to do. I feel like for the first time in a long time, they've got their cornerback situation pretty well ironed out. I don't know that they're great at that position, but they're certainly decent with what they drafted. I think Carlton Davis is a nice piece for them in that defense. So I think overall, there is a lot to like. There's a key player, I think, in my opinion, on this roster, though, in the starting 22 that needs to show up for this team this year, and that's Jameson Williams. I think that, here's a point where he's finally, he's a year plus removed from his major injury. He's had a chance to adapt and learn the NFL game. We've seen little sparks of him being dynamic here and there, bits and pieces. They're going to need someone to step up with Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam LaPorta there. And we know what you're getting with St. Brown and Sam LaPorta. I mean, two of the best in the business. LaPorta was amazing as a rookie.
He was.
St. Brown's one of my favorite players. I mean, he's just so fun to watch. We know they're going to be able to run the ball with Montgomery and Gibbs there. The offensive line is good again. So, again, not a real weakness on there. If anything, to me, it's that second and third receiver there. Can you get guys making plays? If Jameson Williams can take a leap and be the guy they drafted early on, man, this team could be really good. But they need that. I feel like if not, not that they're going to struggle. I mean, their offense didn't struggle last year and Williams wasn't exactly crushing it. But I feel like he's kind of that piece that really needs to step up for this team this year if they want to really kind of, again, fight for that Super Bowl. So here's kind of the kind of similar to the Bears here. When you look on paper here, tell me where's the weakness? I mean, what do you see that's like, ooh, I don't know about this Lions team? It's not really there. The only thing I'm looking at here is I think now they might be a little bit overvalued. I think the division overall is better. I think their schedule is harder. And now they're going to get people's best shot every week. And that's a totally different situation to be in than when you're the guy, sneaking up on the big dogs. So, I don't see anything on paper that leads me to believe this Lions team can't win the division again. Again, I think there's a reason they're favored and they've earned that. I just don't see any value betting this team, though. That's my concern, or that's my, I guess, lack of an angle as far as the betting aspect goes.
Yeah, there is a lot to like. I mean, starting with the offensive line, which you mentioned, which is a really big deal, right? I mean, that's the reason that this team has been so good running the ball. And they have three backs that showed themselves to be capable last year. I think Jahmyr Gibbs if he takes a step forward this year, which I think he probably does, that's a great weapon, because what you pointed out is one of two places that I would point on this team that are a little concerning to me, which is the lack of depth at the skill position. But I think Jahmyr Gibbs maybe could kind of be that third guy in a sense, along with Amon-Ra and LaPorta. So anytime I talk about injuries, we say like every team's going to have to deal with injuries. But I do think that is a little bit of, like, if Amon-Ra St. Brown goes down, if Sam LaPorta goes down, like some of these other teams, I mean, we're going to get to Green Bay and be like, we got a bunch of other guys, where Detroit is not in that same boat. The thing with Jameson Williams for me too, maybe he'll step up and be what he was expected to be, but I've been hearing about this now, and we've had this with other guys at times where they just don't make the leap. And you're never quite sure why. And maybe he will this year. I'm not saying he can't, but I am sort of in the boat of like, you got to prove it to me. Because, I can't just keep hearing about the potential you have, but then it doesn't show up on the field. And so I agree with you that it's a big deal whether he does or not, but I'm not buying that he will. So there's that. Then I think on the defense, I think what you said about DJ Reader, honestly, Aleem McNeil, I don't really know anything about him. I didn't do any research.
I think he's a stud, man. I think he's a stud.
And I think that's huge, because one of the things for me was going to be, can they get a pass rush? I mean, you could look at the numbers, but I just remember watching Lions games last year and being like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like, they're still not close. And so I do think having a stronger interior of the line that allows Aiden Hutchinson to be able to get after the quarterback a little bit more is a big deal, because I feel like their pass rush was lacking last year.
Yeah, fair.
And I think their offense, or their defense overall, was a little suspect. And this is the other thing for me is, in pass coverage, I wonder about how good these linebackers are in pass coverage. I think they're probably fine in terms of like run stopping and overall linebacker play. Especially Jack Campbell. I wonder about in pass coverage. And then also Terrion Arnold is slated to start a cornerback who's a rookie. I don't love having a rookie being one of your top two cornerbacks. So I wouldn't say that the secondary and pass coverage is like, oh my gosh, huge red flag, this is terrible. But it's another one of those, like, I'm not sure I love it. Like, I think it's okay. And again, if we're already talking about these points that it's like, okay, it's okay, what happens when they lose a cornerback?
Right.
This just I think that would be one of my biggest points overall, is this team feels less capable of absorbing injuries than some of the other ones we're going to talk about at some of these key positions. And so that concerns me a little bit for Detroit. I think that's my main stuff with them. To be honest, Detroit is almost the opposite of Chicago for me. So I enjoy Detroit as a Vikings fan. We're like the lowly teams that cheer for each other. So if the Vikings can't win, I'm happy for the Lions too. It's been fun to see them build this team. But I will say where I stand today anyway. I agree, or like I believe what you said might be true, which is that the pendulum has swung too far the other way. Right. I think this is a good team, but I'm not sure it's a great team.
Yeah.
And I think what happened last season, some bounces going their way, has people overvaluing this team some. And so I feel lower on the Lions than the market, even though I think it's a good team. So I'm not saying I'm going to bet it, but I actually have a little bit of interest in under 10.5 at even money. Let me see where I had them right now. I went off of it. Yeah, I have them projected for like 9.5. So I'm a win under the total at even money. So that's the one that I'm interested in, whether I do it or not.
Yeah, I think everything you said is fair there. I really do. And I just again, you look on paper and you don't see the weakness. But although I do think you made a great case on the depth there, I think that I didn't touch on that. And you're right. I mean, there are there are probably a handful of guys on that roster, a St. Brown, a Hutchinson, a Carlton Davis, those guys go out and it's like, what happens from there? So, I mean, I think you definitely bring up a really good point there on that. But I think you're right. I mean, every year you want to kind of look and see who's a progressing candidate, who's a regression candidate. And I mean, I think the Lions are clearly a regression candidate. Again, kind of like the Bears. Would I be shocked if they won 12 games? No, they could do that. But I don't, but I'm with you. I mean, I think you have to lean under on this. I think that, that plus 120 is just, I mean, that's crazy to me. I think when you look at that, like, yes, I understand they were a fair amount better than the rest of that division a year ago. We can say that, even the Packers. But plus 120 when you match these 4 teams up, like, that seems crazy to me, because I don't know, man. I mean, this division seems a lot more like a coin flip for these teams than it does, the difference between, what is it, about plus 350 for the Bears, give or take.
Yeah.
And I mean, so it's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we'll get to the other teams, but I think we're on the same page. We're even, I mean, I'm not super excited about the Vikings, but with all 4 of these teams, when they play each other, I think it's competitive games. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think any of these teams are so head and shoulders above the others that, like, one team's blowing out the other teams.
No, I mean, this is not this is not that situation at all. I mean, I think this is going to be a very competitive division. I mean, I think, we talk about the AFC North, but this is right there with it.
Yeah, I think so too. All right. Anything else on the Lions? I forgot to ask you if you have anything for Chicago. We can go back, but anything, player wise that you're interested in as well.
Well, so it probably goes against what you said, but I would lean towards the under on Caleb Williams' yardage. And I realize, like you said, this offense could be really good, and he has multiple people to throw the football to. But there are a few things that I look at here. First of all, his yardage total set anywhere from 3,600 to like 3,750, depending upon where I mean, that's a pretty high number for a rookie. Yep. I mean, it really is. Again, look at like what CJ Stroud did, and I had it somewhere what he put up last year. But you start looking at that, but then you also got to remember, like, okay, yes, the Lions and the Vikings play in a dome, but he's playing his home games out in the cold, and they're going to play, in Lambeau and that. And a lot of times when we get to November, those throwing yards can come way down. And not that Vegas isn't accounting for that. I mean, they know more than we do. So, I mean, there's all that in there. But at the end of the day, though, I mean, I'm looking at that and saying, beat me, rookie. I mean,
right.
I mean, that's kind of where I'm at with it. So, that on the Bears, I mean, that was really the only thing that jumped out to me that I like there.
I'll say I don't hate it. So CJ Stroud, I mean, he absolutely went nuclear, and he had 41.08. Right. So yeah, it's more, but like, he had an insane rookie season.
Right. And
Yanni, like I said, when I was talking about the Bears, like, I just think Caleb Williams needs to be average. Right. Average is probably under on that passing number.
And they probably run the ball a lot too, like you said.
Agreed.
So I mean, Agreed. Are they going to generally ask him, especially in these divisional games, maybe against the Lions if they get in a shootout? But I mean, in these divisional games, they're probably going to be handing the ball off a lot and not asking him to throw a lot. So, I don't know. That was the one bet I had circled here. And I wouldn't say that I love it. I have not bet it yet, but I definitely, mark that down.
Yep. I didn't really have player stuff there. I spent so much time like looking at these teams. I didn't focus in on the players very much yet. I still have to go back and do that. So. All right. Well, you ready to move on to the Packers?
Let's do it.
I'll try not to slander them too much or anything. Packers, Matt LaFleur coming back for his 6th year. Defensive coordinator got changed up. Jeff Hafley is coming in from Boston College, where he was the head coach. Surprising. Anyway, 9-8 last year, but man, we saw them come on as the year went on. And, we had all these questions about Jordan Love and could he be even decent? And man, he sure looked the part, especially as the year progressed. As much as I hate to admit it, and as much as if they go from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers to Jordan Love, it's going to be a fucking disaster for my life. He looks good. So strength of schedule, 7th for me in the league. So pretty high there again. And in terms of win total here, set at 9.5, shaded to the over, -134, +115 to the under. Odds to win the division 210. So they are second in division odds behind the Lions right now. Yanni, obviously the Packers built a lot of momentum through the second half of last year, looked like a team that could be in that upper echelon of the NFL again. Do you think that's where they're headed this season?
This is another tough one. I will say out of the 4 teams, the Packers are probably the easiest to handicap. But when I say that, it's relative. They're not easy. When you look at this group here, I guess just to touch on what you have, I have a similar strength of schedule there. Similar to where the Lions are. They're kind of in that same mold there. Green Bay was also good against the spread last year. So, kind of again, I think especially late in the season, as you said, there was value betting this team because they came on. And I think at least for people like me, you kind of mentioned it, I wasn't sold on Jordan Love. So it's like, the Packers, whatever. And then all of a sudden you see Jordan Love playing great football. Kind of the opposite of what we're talking about with the Bears, right? We're like, man, this organization can't hit a quarterback to save their life.
Yeah.
And now you're saying the Packers, Favre, Rodgers,
the Packers just throw darts and they all hit the bullseye.
Somehow they all work out. So it's like, how is it? Is it good scouting? Is it a good system? Is it who knows? Whatever it is, it seems to be working.
Witchcraft, perhaps. I don't know.
Maybe they sell their soul. I don't know. Who knows what they're doing over there? But I would say this. I think right now, Jordan Love is the best quarterback in this division. And that, if you had asked me that 12 months ago, I would have laughed because I would have said even Jared Goff's better. I said I would have taken a rookie over him. I'd say, whoever.
Sam Darnold.
You're right. Probably. I mean, honestly, I'm not going to sit here and say that I thought Jordan Love was going to be a great quarterback because quite frankly, from the limited sample size, I'm like, I don't know that he's got it. And maybe, we still have only seen a season, right? I mean, it's not, I don't want to crown this guy Favre and Rodgers just yet. I mean, he's not there yet, but man, he looked good. He looked really good that second half of the season. It's like, he definitely seems to have that innate quarterback sense, right? Like he kind of knows where his guys are going to be. He's accurate getting them the ball. He kind of does that cliche intangible stuff that, a lot of the great quarterbacks do. And stuff that I don't know is necessarily all coaching. It's like when you watch some of the throws, because it's like you watch some of the guys that do breakdowns, whether it's a Dan Orlovsky or a Brian Baldinger or some of these guys, when you watch them break down Jordan Love, you're like, holy crap. Like, you're like, I don't know how many quarterbacks in the league would have saw that and made that happen, So I think we're potentially dealing with the best quarterback in the division right now. And that could change. Again, Caleb Williams is the number 1 pick, right? I mean, we don't know what we're going to get there. I mean, we'll get to your Vikings. They've got a rookie quarterback. I mean, we don't know what we're getting. But to me, the quarterback always will be the most important position, quarterback, head coach. They have a veteran head coach who's pretty good. I think we'll talk coaching here in a second, but they've got the head coach. I think they have the best quarterback. My question is, they had good offensive line play the last 2 years, really. And when I look at it on paper, it doesn't look that great. Like these aren't guys that jump out like, oh, they got big Pro Bowler guy here and whatever. Yet somehow they grade out very well. Yeah. So that's the big question mark to me is like, okay, is this offensive line going to be another, top 5, top 10 group again this year? Or maybe they were overachieving. Maybe, things fell into place. That's the question mark for me on this team is that. And for me, it's kind of been that with the Packers. The other question mark I always have with them is they never seem to value the toughness on the defensive side of the ball. They have been soft against the run for I don't know how many years. I think you have to go back to 400-pound Gilbert Brown playing nose tackle for them. So the last time they were stopping the run. Yeah, man. I mean, and they didn't really do much to, when you look at that there, it's like, did they do enough? I mean, they're banking on, I think, very average players, to kind of stop the run there. And maybe that's not part of their scheme. I mean, some teams don't care about giving up rushing yards. When you play in the NFC North, I think you need to. We know the Lions are going to try to run the ball. The Bears are going to run it. Minnesota can, no matter who they have, can run it. So I think, that is always a little bit of a concern for me, but I love the addition of Xavier McKinney in that secondary. I think him anchoring that secondary can really help, overall. And I think that they potentially could be good at rushing the passer. Preston Smith has always been a very capable pass rusher. Lucas Van Ness, they drafted last year, is kind of a good third down guy that can, get after it there. Rashawn Gary he's a year removed from his ACL injury. So he's a guy that can get after the quarterback. He's a good player too. So, again, not a whole lot of glaring weaknesses in my opinion on this team. And, we didn't even talk on the offensive side. They're very deep at receiver, as you mentioned, maybe not necessarily a Justin Jefferson WR1, but a whole heck of a lot of WR2s on that roster, guys that you can plug and play. And like you said, when Christian Watson sits out, big deal. Jaden Reed makes plays, right? When he's not out there, Romeo Doubs, whoever, it's like they just mix and match. Good at the tight end position, or average at least at the tight end position. They got guys that can make plays there, high draft picks. And of course, we didn't even talk about Josh Jacobs there. They brought in a guy, Aaron Jones was I always felt he was kind of the heartbeat of that offense. When he went, that offense went. But I think, they may have upgraded here, right? I mean, they got a guy who, when he's on, he can crank it. Bad offensive line last year, struggled early out of the gate, that kind of a thing. I don't anticipate that happening. I think he's going to have a good year. They'll mix in A.J. Dillon and, whoever else they want to put in that mix there. But here's what I would say. I think the Packers, because of the quarterback position, this is a team that I think goes over that win total this year. I think that he's kind of the difference in some of those close games, maybe against the Bears or even the Lions there, where it's like, hey, this game's close. You going with Caleb Williams or are you going with Jordan Love at this point? I mean, I'll take the year of experience and the good, strong play we saw over guys like Caleb Williams or JJ McCarthy or Sam Darnold or that. So, maybe not Goff. That's a little different, but that's probably why they're not favorites here. And again, roster, they don't boast a lot of like all pro players on that roster. I mean, who's their big name? Jair Alexander, maybe. I mean, I guess Josh Jacobs now on the offensive side of the ball. They don't boast a lot of huge big name players, but it seems like they get these young guys that just come in and they execute well. And it's like, you watch these guys and it's almost like you watch some of these teams and they have great players. And sometimes in clutch moments, they drop the ball or they miss a block or whatever, everyone's human. It doesn't seem like the Packers do that. It's like they get these like, whatever, I called them WR2s, these Jaden Reeds and these Romeo Doubs. And it's like, they just make plays. Like they just make the catch when it needs to be made. They make the blocks when they need to give Love protection. So I think that there's a lot to like with this Green Bay team. I don't think they're necessarily on a Super Bowl level. I don't think they're there with like San Francisco, Philly, maybe some of those other teams that you want to talk about in the NFC. But I definitely think they are live to win this division. I think that's very possible. I think double-digit wins for this team. I like the over 9.5 here.
You're making me grumpy, Yanni. But
sorry, man. I hate it. I hate it.
I'm just kidding.
It's not fair that they get 3 quarterbacks in a row, man. I get it. I get it.
Well, a few things on stuff you said. I do think Josh Jacobs is a nice upgrade, but part of the reason is just the workload that he's likely to be able to carry, where Aaron Jones was hurt a lot. And even when he played, I mean, I actually really like Aaron Jones, and carry for carry, I don't even know that I would take Josh Jacobs over Aaron Jones, but there's such a big difference in the workload and the likelihood of injury. Anybody can get injured, but Aaron Jones is more likely. Yeah. So I do think that that's definitely an upgrade for them at running back. I wish I could give credit for this next thing, but I listened to quite a few different podcasts and stuff, and I can't remember where I heard it. So unfortunately I can't, but it was interesting because they were talking about Christian Watson, and it was with like a beat reporter for the Packers. And they said that he had gone and gotten some special medical testing done because he kept having these recurring hamstring injuries and stuff. And they were trying to figure out why. And apparently because of an injury in college, he had a huge disparity in the strength of one leg over the other. And because of that, it caused the injury to recur. It was like 20% difference in strength between your legs. Wow. And they were saying what you want to be is under 10% is normal. So he's been doing a lot of work on that apparently, and was down to like 9% difference in the new testing that they had done. Now, does that mean he doesn't get hurt? I don't know. Maybe they're wrong. Maybe that's not why. But it was interesting at least to hear like, hey, maybe they found something, because that did seem like a big problem. And if he could stay healthy, that's a nice thing for the Packers.
Sure.
I mean, you alluded to this, but man, I mean, and you said there's no, real number one receiver here, and there's not a Justin Jefferson, but honestly, like Jaden Reed's a really good receiver.
Yeah.
Romeo Doubs is a really good receiver. I think Dontavian Wicks is probably a 2, and Christian Watson's probably more of a field stretcher, but they're both really good at the things that they do. So this group taken as a whole is really impressive. I'm not pumped about their tight ends, Luke Musgrave, Tucker Kraft. I mean, they're serviceable. They are fine. It's not like they can't do their job. And when you've got 4 receivers like that, you don't need your tight ends to be phenomenal, right? Like, hey, go to that really open part of the end zone and just catch the ball that gets floated to you. It's not that hard. So I do think that the offense is going to be really good. Unfortunately, I think the only thing that stops them is regression from Jordan Love that we don't see coming. Because I expect him to keep getting better. And he made mistakes here and there, and he's still young, and he probably will still do that. But every quarterback makes mistakes here and there. So that's no big deal. I agree with you that he's the best quarterback in this division. And I think that is a really big deal. On the defense, this defense feels to me similar to what I thought about the Lions, which is, pretty good. I'm not pumped, but I don't think they're bad. Again, they have a couple rookies that are probably going to be starting. Edgerrin Cooper at linebacker, Javon Bullard at safety, and they could come in and be fine. But I always wonder, when you've got safeties starting, rookies starting, what's that going to look like? The other thing to me, and I'm not going to pretend I know a lot here, but Jeff Hafley, and this is again where I've listened to some other stuff. I mean, he hasn't exactly been stellar hardly anywhere he's been, except I think Ohio State way back in the past. So it feels like just kind of a weird hire to me on the defensive side of the ball, and maybe they know something that we don't know, and it's great. But I just wonder, like, do they get? It's just, I guess, a possible weak point I see is maybe the defensive scheme isn't going to be phenomenal, where the defense is already probably, if there is more of a weakness on this team, that's where it is.
Yeah.
That's where it could come in. The only other thing I'll say here, the thing that when we get to where we think these teams might finish, man, I really agree with your point that having the best quarterback is a big deal. I do think that this schedule is on the tougher side. And like you said, I'm not sure that they're 49ers quality yet. So I like them to be in and win a lot of games. But I think that schedule is a little bit of an issue. So I have so much variance on this team, man, like in terms of where they could finish. But as we talk about it, they honestly feel very stable. Like you kind of know what you're getting. You said at the beginning, it's the easiest breakdown in this division.
Yeah.
As we talk through it, I think you're kind of right. This is an above average team. Like that's what they are.
Their breakdown is very similar to a year ago. It's, hey, how's Jordan Love going to do? We think we kind of know the defense will be average. What we didn't know a year ago was that these receivers would step up. So that's a nice, I think, bonus. But, I don't see a whole lot. I'm sure when I go back and look last year at what I had, I mean, it's not drastically different. I do worry, you said on the defensive side of the ball, I worry about them getting pushed around. I mean, I think that has happened to this team frequently, where they can get pushed around. And again, in a division where you have an offensive line like Detroit, that can kind of run the ball at you. We know the Bears are going to try to run the ball. Your Vikings should be able to run the ball a little bit. I mean, that worries me a little bit. And I think, also that you talked about the depth on the lines. I think that's a good point too, on the defensive side, particularly, with Green Bay here is, again, if they do lose a Preston Smith, a Jair Alexander, what does it look like from there? And granted, they did pretty well last year weathering some injuries. So maybe it's more scheme related and whatever. I think the coordinator call out is a good thing. I mean, we you can't take for granted a good coordinator or potentially a weak one. Now, again, I'm not going to claim that I know if this guy's going to be good or not because I have no idea, but I definitely think it's worth keeping an eye on and pointing out. I think you had a good call with that.
Yeah. Well, any player props that you're interested in for the
No,
Packers?
not necessarily. I mean, I don't like to make a living out of betting overs. I mean, I think Josh Jacobs, to your point, I think he could see a hefty workload. I actually didn't see his numbers posted. I was kind of looking to see where they were, and I didn't see
there's
them.
a lot of players that aren't really out yet, which
Yeah,
makes it tough to make a call on it.
And I always wonder because even when Aaron Jones was healthy, it's like they love bringing AJ Dillon in. They love mixing people in. So it's like I don't. There's nothing in particular that jumps out on me in this team that I love. Too many players, on the wide receiver end. And that it's nothing that's jumping out for me.
Yeah. Well, and for the reason you just said, and I haven't seen lines out either, so I can't say whether this would be good or not. But I wonder about some unders on some of the receivers just because there are so many options. And I think this team might try to run the ball a decent amount. I think they'll probably be pretty balanced. I don't mean they're going to be the Chargers, which we'll get to someday. But and like you said, if other teams try to run against them, that slows the game down a little bit. Depending on those numbers, I'd be interested in even just like taking an under on all of them and hoping 3 out of the 4 hit,
Yeah, right.
All right. Well, let's move on to the last team in this division, the Minnesota Vikings. Kevin O'Connell's back for his 3rd year. Brian Flores is back on defense. Everybody run around with your heads cut off and then do crazy stuff once they hike the ball kind of scheme. 7-10 last year. Strength of schedule here, I have a 2nd in the league. So one of the hardest schedules in the league. Over under is set at 6.5. That is shaded to the over -140. You can get plus 127 under, plus 1,000 to win the division. Yanni, obviously, Vegas is looking at the Vikings as an absolute long shot here, not only to win the division, but even to have a sniff of making the playoffs. Would you agree with that assessment?
First of all, I do. I mentioned it at the beginning. I do think this line is a little disrespectful. I feel like it should be a little bit closer to where the Bears are there. And I think it's fair to have them, preseason 4th there, just based on what we're going to talk about. But I do think that is a little bit of a long shot where I'm like, they might be a little more competitive than that. So I'll start by saying that, and let me talk about some good things first of all here. First of all, they were horrible. They've been horrible with turnovers the last however many years, right? 2-3 years. At some point, you got to think that there's going to be a little luck going one way there. And I know that turnovers often are a result of things like a good pass rush or whatever.
Nick Mullins.
Right. Josh Dobbs, whatever you doing there. But, some of it is luck too. So it's like, you look at that and you start off there, but I think that there are some really good things here. And I mean, obviously I think we have to point to the skill positions, right? I mean, their skill position players are as good as any team in the league. You won't find a better RB WR1-2 tight end as they have. I mean, they're as good as it gets there. But the question marks become, can Hawkinson come back from what was a pretty bad injury? I mean, how much time is it going to take? And, is he going to be able to just dive right back in? I mean, we've seen sometimes it's the following year before they're actually back to their old selves. And it just sucks that he got injured the way he did in basically garbage time there with, at the end where it's like, come on, man. But anyways, that's neither here nor there. They need Hawkinson back. I mean, that's the thing where when you've got 2 really good receivers like they have, when you have a really good tight end, and I think Hawkinson's potentially the best tight end in the league, if not, one, he's in the top 3 or 4. I mean, that offense becomes really hard to deal with. We know their offensive line is good. It's basically back. They pretty good run blocking, pretty good pass blocking group. I think they're going to run the ball well. I really do. I think they're going to run the ball, better than they have. the last year and a half when Dalvin Cook kind of just fell off the rails there. And, they kind of just got away from that and became just hey, we're going to drop back and chuck it up to Jefferson. And I think we'll see him more balanced, which I think will help the offense. But let's be honest here. I think that this team is very much going to see how good Kirk Cousins was for them. And he took a lot of crap. And, he sometimes fizzled in big moments. Sometimes he made costly turnovers. I'm not going to suggest that Kirk Cousins is perfect by any means. But, man, he played really good football, in my opinion. When you watched him play, he was able to get the ball to Jefferson and Hawkinson and these guys. And, he was able to get them in games, keep them in games, make drives when they need them. And the old saying, when you've got two quarterbacks, you got zero. Well, right now we got Sam Darnold, who I'm thinking is going to start the season, it sounds like.
What they're saying.
And then, of course, we've got the rookie J.J. McCarthy in there, who I would be shocked if he doesn't get his run at some point. I mean, unless Darnold comes in and lights it up, which is possible, but probably unlikely. But you never know. He's never had weapons like he's got here. And, I mean, who knows? I mean, maybe he can come in and, do it. Well, I guess – maybe he did when he was in San Francisco for that brief few minutes that he was there, but he never got a chance to play there. So, so anyways, I mean, I think when you look at this offense, there's still a lot to like here, but kind of like we said with the Bears, I mean, when I'm looking at Jordan Love and Jared Goff compared to Caleb Williams, I'm doing the same thing against Sam Darnold and J.J. McCarthy. And until one of them can prove that they can be a franchise quarterback, which may happen, I hope for you it does happen, but until they can prove that, I just can't buy in on this offense, even with the great skill position players they have. I hate to say this, but I sense a lot of frustrated Justin Jefferson on the sidelines, because again, he may not realize how great he had it with Kirk Cousins dropping back and chucking the ball to him, finding him, getting open, and, we'll see. I mean, we'll see. Maybe he's that good that he's going to get open and Darnold or McCarthy will get there. I don't know, but I think we're going to see that offense struggle a bit, even though I do like the balance that I think they're going to have running the football. I think that's going to be an improvement for them year over the year. Where I'm looking at, though, is that defense. And we said a year ago, Brian Flores is going to do some stuff there. And he did. I mean, they were substantially better. I mean, they were arguably the worst defense in the league the year before, if not the worst.
Not a hard argument.
Yeah, it really wasn't. And, Flores came in really without a ton of talent. And did some nice things. I think they have some talent. I like the Andrew Van Ginkel pickup. I think Van Ginkel is an underrated cat, man. When I watch that dude, he's that guy. And, he gets the sportscaster cliche, high motor white guy, right? Like just running around. The guy makes plays. He flat out makes plays. So I think that's a sneaky good pickup that nobody talks about. I think that's going to help them. I wonder how much Harrison Smith has left in the tank. I mean, it's like, he seemed okay last year. He didn't seem great. He didn't seem terrible. He seemed okay. Certainly not the guy from 3 or 4 years ago that was, kind of that perennial Pro Bowler type player. That worries me though. I mean, because when those guys fall off, I mean, I watched it with one of my favorite players, Jordan Poyer. When they hit their wall, man, it comes fast, and I look at a guy like Harrison Smith back there in that secondary, and I'm kind of like, he's been such a critical anchor. Where is he? But my big concern is the pass rush. And I know that it wasn't a trade, but I know they essentially swapped Danielle Hunter for Jonathan Grenard. And Grenard had a good year, with Houston. I think he had 10.5 sacks, maybe something like that. I mean, it was a solid year. And I think he's a solid player, but I don't view him, and I don't know that any offensive coordinator is going to view him in the light of that. Again, TJ Watt, Montez Sweat, Myles Garrett type player. So I worry a little bit on the pass rush. Are they going to be able to get after the quarterback without having to do exotic stuff? And Brian Flores will if anybody's going to figure out a way to do it, he'll do it. But I worry that by doing that, it's like, are they going to give up big plays? What's going to happen there? So I think that defense, I don't think they're going to be bad. I think much like last year, they'll be okay. But I don't know that they're going to be great. And when you combine that with potentially Sam Darnold, J.J. McCarthy quarterback play, that's why they're sitting at fourth, and entering the odds there. So same thing as every one of those three teams, though, higher ceiling than I think most people would say. And I'm not just saying this because it's you. I mean, I really believe that this team could be competitive. I don't think they're not going to be an easy out. Like, I don't think teams are like, oh, we got the Vikings this week. That's no, try guarding Justin Jefferson, worry about stopping Aaron Jones. I mean, I don't think they're going to be an easy out. I just wonder in those close games, and of course we know 2 years ago they won every single close game. And then, last year it kind of evened out a little more, but I just wonder this year, when you look at it, it's like, all right, it's 20-17 in the fourth quarter and it's a close game. And we need Sam Darnold or JJ McCarthy to make something happen here. And then we need the defense to get a stop. Are they there? That's to me where the difference between a mediocre and a great team is what can they do with that? I don't think they have the horses with the quarterback position and on the defense to do those things needed to win the close game. So unfortunately, I think that this over under win total is probably right around where it should be. 6-7-ish wins. I mean, they're at 6.5, as you mentioned there. This team could win double-digit games. I'm not just saying it because you're here. I mean it. They could. I don't see it happening, though. I think that, that quarterback position, they're going to have to figure out if J.J. McCarthy's the guy. We talked about it. Who were we talking about last week? I can't remember what team when we were saying that they're going to, Geno Smith with the Seahawks, who said they want to see what they got, I'm sure, with Sam Howell, but they got to play Geno Smith. And I think with guys like Jefferson and Addison and Hawkinson, if he's out there, and Jones, they're going to have to roll Darnold out there to start, right, and see what they got. Chances are, unless they start 4-1 or 4-2 or whatever, they're going to want to see what they have with McCarthy. The fans are going to be screaming for McCarthy. And I think even as a fan, you probably want to see what they have in McCarthy because you need to figure out if he's going to be the guy or if they need to go back to the drawing board. So that to me, though, that's a concern. I mean, again, when you have two quarterbacks, you have zero, because then it's like, what if McCarthy comes in and struggle? Well, let's go back to Darnold for a game and then, whatever on that. So I see a little bit of a revolving door at the quarterback position. So to me, that's why I think that rightfully so, they're fourth. Although, again, to me, a plus 650, plus 750 seems more reasonable to me, more of where I feel like it should be. If you put a gun to my head, I would say they win 7 games, so I would go over, but I think realistically that 6-7 number is probably where they are. And you also touched on it too. The last thing, the difference between the Bears schedule and the Vikings schedule, it's crazy, right? I mean, I know it's early, things can change, people can get hurt, all that stuff, but the Bears have a cakewalk compared to what the Vikings are dealing with. I mean, the Vikings have a pretty tough road to hoe. So again, are they going to get blown out? Probably not, but can they win those tough games? That's asking a lot with guys like Darnold or a rookie like McCarthy.
Yep. I mean, this is where I was going to start is Minnesota goes to the Giants. Here's what happens after that. San Francisco, Houston, Green Bay, the Jets. They have a bye in week 6. If not before, that's where J.J. McCarthy comes in because they're 1-4 at that point.
Right.
Detroit, the Rams, the Colts, okay. And then it mellows out a little bit after that. But that first half of the schedule in particular, like if there was a bet that J.J. McCarthy is starting by week 7, I would take that bet because I think that there's no guarantee they beat the Giants with Sam Darnold at quarterback. So that's just an incredibly difficult schedule to start with. So I'll say that up front. And you said that, but I think just to highlight how hard it is.
Yeah, that's brutal.
Yeah, it's brutal. But so here's a few things I'll say. And I think the schedule here is massive. The schedule and the quarterback is massive. And you pointed to those things. If they had Cousins back and they had the schedule the Bears have, I would say that they're in the mix to win the division.
Oh, 100%.
Because I think their offense, you said these things, but their offensive line is good. Even if Hawkinson isn't healthy, which would stink and definitely is a step down, that's still a good offense that can run the ball, can pass the ball, has probably the best receiver in the league, or obviously at least in the conversation. I did think when you said Justin Jefferson's going to be moping on the sidelines a lot, I thought they need to have a staffer who just has his bank account pulled up at all times and just show him his bank account, cheer him up a little bit.
Right.
But no, I think so that's good. And then on the defensive side of the ball, maybe I'm being too optimistic. And of course, I don't love Danielle Hunter. I don't love Harrison Smith being a year older. But I actually kind of like what they did in the offseason on the defense. I like that they added Dallas Turner in the draft. I think what they did is they brought in a large number of NFL quality players, not stars, but NFL quality players. And I think in a defense like Brian Flores's, if you can just not have a bunch of weak links and everybody can kind of hold their own, I think he can do a lot with that. So I actually think the defense is going to be better this year than they were last year. Now, maybe teams can adjust to Flores' scheme a little bit more or whatever. But personnel wise, again, I think it's maybe not as high profile, but I think it's more solid across the board. So I don't feel too bad about that. The other thing, just to add some color, you talked about the turnovers, minus 12 turnover differential last year. And I actually had them 1.39 wins over expectation, given the turnover differential, which says like, hey, this is an okay team that's just turning the ball over way too much. Right. And people wanted to shit on them for, now they lose all the close games. And it's like, yeah, when you're a negative turnover differential every week, that is what's going to happen.
That's what happens.
So even if they can bring that thing back to something like even, now you're saying like, okay, they're probably in these games. But for me, I don't believe in Sam Darnold at all. I think he's not good. And I think he'll just prove that again. Part of the reason that I don't believe it's connected to me to coaching. Kevin O'Connell just like seems to make boneheaded moves as often. Like he's heralded as this great offensive mind, this phenomenal coach, and sometimes there's good stuff. But man, just as often, I'm like, what the hell are you guys doing? I don't have exact examples, but I feel like I'm left scratching my head at the coaching when I watch the Vikings more often than not. So I don't believe just because Kevin O'Connell says, hey, we think Sam Darnold has something, hey, we want him to start the whole year, that doesn't instill any faith in me that Sam Darnold actually has something. So I think this team starts out 1-4 or 0-5. For that reason, this gets a little deeper into the futures, but I'm actually interested in under. Was it 6.5? Did I say?
Yeah, 6.5.
Yeah, under 6.5 at plus money. Partly because if they go 1-4 or even 0-5, all of a sudden you could pick up an over 5.5, or at some point even an over 4.5 if you really think, hey, that schedule gets softer and they're going to be able to come back and win some games. Because I agree with you. Across the roster, this is a team that is on par with most of the other teams in this division, but their quarterback is deficient. Their schedule is super hard, and I'm not pumped about especially the head coach.
Yeah.
So that, I have the Vikings. Let me see. I have it projected for right around 7 wins. So, like you said, but I also I don't have them favored in a single game. Like I have some, or actually that's not fair. What I mean is I don't have them expected to win a single game. Like where I do those, the middles. So like I have quite a few games where it's like, okay, they have a chance here, but I don't have any where I'm like, yeah, they should win this game.
Wow.
So, I mean, they have to go to Seattle. Yeah. That's probably like one of the easy. Well, and I guess they get Arizona at home. But we talked about Arizona, like Arizona's going to be okay. Maybe they're favored there, but it's a 2.5 points, 3 points kind of thing. So, So anyway, that's where I'm at with the Vikings. I wouldn't mind some unders on offensive players here because the quarterback play is not going to be good. I don't mind unders on JJ McCarthy's passing yards because if he doesn't play.
2650, I think, is what it was.
Yeah, if he doesn't play till week 7 after the bye, which I think is the most natural thing to have happen.
Yeah. It's certainly, I'm glad you rattled off their schedule because it certainly seems almost destined that Darnold goes till the bye. McCarthy would come in week 7, which, I mean, so he gets essentially 12 games roughly, give or take, if he plays all of them. So he would need to average 225. I mean, I'm with you. I have that circled, McCarthy under 2650. I don't know that McCarthy could play enough games because again, I have a feeling that if he comes in, unless he's just looking calm, cool, and collective, they may put him back on the bench. So I'm with you. I mean, I think kind of different situation than Caleb Williams, but same concept. Hey, rookie, beat me. Let's
right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. I don't mind it. All right. Well, before we move on to ranking a couple things here, as we've been doing, I do just want to say, if you're watching this video, a couple things. First of all, really appreciate you watching. Would love to hear your comments on what you think about these teams. Drop those in the comments. Hit the like button while you're doing it. Also subscribe, because we've got a lot of different content coming out, and that way you don't have to always check back. You can be alerted when it comes up. We do have 2 videos out already, the NFC East and the NFC West, so you can go back and check those out. And then also a couple different ways you can get content from Yanni and from me throughout the season, leading up to the season, at Yanni_bet on X, also at the Bet Crushers. Go follow those. You can follow me at Big Tasty Sports, and then also on our websites. I know both of us do some writing and different things, especially as we get closer to the season. So that's betcrushers.com and bigtastysports.com. Would appreciate you checking that stuff out. All right, let's move on to first. We are going to rank the head coaches in this division. How do you have them ranked, Yanni?
All right, so I struggled a little bit with this, and for one main reason here, I've got Matt LaFleur first, and I struggled with it because I don't think I can ever. I don't really have a stake in it, so I don't care. But forgive him for not going for it on 4th down with Aaron Rodgers. I think that was one of those things that if you rewind the clock and you say just a league-altering mistake, right? So it's hard, because I'm like, I don't know if I can overcome that. But if you throw that out, realistically, I think he's the guy in the division right now. I mean, he's kind of proven he can take quarterbacks and play with them, whether that's Rodgers, whether that's Love. I think offensively, obviously, they do some good things. He seems to have I'm going to call it a well-run, staff team, that kind of a thing. So I'm going to go LaFleur number 1. I've actually got Kevin O'Connell number 2. I'm curious to hear your take, just because based on what you shared and how, whatever. But, I kind of did the exercise of, okay, if I were hiring a coach, who would I take? And I would take O'Connell second. It was tough. And I've got Dan Campbell as third. And it was tough because I'm telling you, I love Dan Campbell. I mean, what he did with that organization is amazing. But there's 2 things here. Number 1, eventually that act can run old, right? Where it's kind of that rah-rah, all that stuff that he does. So eventually that's going to wear out. So it's like, what do you have behind that? And that's why a guy like LaFleur or even O'Connell, who, they're kind of scheme guys, right? They can do things like that. I don't know that Campbell has that. He's kind of that leader of men, which is very important in a head coach. Again, what he's done with the Lions is amazing. But the other part is there's a difference between good aggressive play calling and Dan Campbell aggressive play calling. And it's like Dan Campbell he calls the game like people play Madden, right? It's like, 4th and 12, let's just go for it. And it's like, I don't get me wrong, I love I hate when coaches are scared. I hate that. But at the same time, it's like, man, I think back to that game where they ended up going for 2 when they could have kicked the extra point, when it was like, the 2-point conversion was on the 12-yard line or whatever. And I was like, dude, just kick the freaking extra point, man. What are you doing? And I had money on that game, so obviously I'm a little bitter on that. But yeah. Still, though, it's kind of a point where I'm like, you got to rein in some of that, like, he's kind of that football meathead, right? And it's like, you got to be able to rein that in a little bit. So even though he's my favorite coach on here, I would rank him 3rd. And then at Eberflus, I would have him 4th. You kind of mentioned it with the Bears. I'm not a huge fan. I think the guy's just whatever out there. Kind of like with Caleb Williams, they've given him the keys to the car here. There's really no excuses. If he can't win games with this lineup here, even with a rookie quarterback, then clearly he's not the guy. He obviously has the most to prove. Campbell's proven it. LaFleur's proven it. And I think O'Connell's, done some nice things like you said. So that would be my order.
All right. I have LaFleur first as well. Yeah, you said it. I have Dan Campbell second. No surprise after what I said. I think Dan Campbell, to me, and you kind of alluded to this, but there's a couple different kinds of coaches that I think can be really effective in the NFL. One is the great play caller, offensive or defensive mind, especially offensive mind, innovative, all that stuff. The other one is, I mean, the rah-rah thing can get old, but I think when you're winning, at least, it can keep a team together and moving forward. And I think he's proven to be a pretty decent leader. Now, if their team totally fell apart, how would that go? I don't know. But I think he's brought some cohesiveness to that team. And so I think that's part of why they've been good, is his leadership. So I like that aspect of Dan Campbell. I have Kevin O'Connell third and then Eberflus fourth as well. And I do have O'Connell a decent amount ahead of Eberflus. So I'm not putting him all the way down there. And Minnesota's had worse in the past. So I try to always remember that. It's like, I may not like him, but who are we getting if he's gone? So,
right.
you know, all right, that's coaches. Next up, let's rank the offenses in this division.
This was really tough. I mean, really tough. Like I feel like I went back and forth with all of them. And I honestly, let me ask you this question before I give you my four. Couldn't you put any of these at number one?
Yeah.
I mean, I think you could realistically. Yes. I mean, what I ended up settling
strengths
on,
and weaknesses, right? Like you got this little hole here, but this strength over here. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, what I ended up rolling with is I took the Lions first. I put the Lions first. I think, they lit up the scoreboard a lot last year. And, you kind of look at it there. Offensive line, very good. Proven veteran quarterback. They can throw the ball, 2 good running backs. So I have them just a tick ahead. And then I went Packers number 2. And I kind of did that based on that Jordan Love argument where I'm like, give me the quarterback, whatever on that. And then you kind of mentioned the depth of receivers that they have, bringing in a guy like Josh Jacobs and that. So, I mean, I've got the Packers 2. I actually went with your Vikings 3. I don't know, where you're at. I think I probably know because you really were high on the Bears. But I just think when you've got Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, and Aaron Jones and an offensive line, like I get it, the quarterback, whatever. But I also I haven't seen anything from the quarterback in Chicago yet either. So I'm going to go ahead and roll with the Vikings at number 3. I'm going to go with the Bears at 4. But I will tell you this. If the Bears ended up with the top offense in the division at the end of the year, I wouldn't be shocked. I would not be shocked. I mean, it could happen. I mean, I love the Keenan. Well, we've already talked about it. I love the Keenan Allen edition. I mean, I love what they got. So, but I'm going to go Lions, Packers, Vikings, Bears is my 4 entering the season.
Man, I agree with you. This is so hard. Like, even as you were talking, I'm looking at what I have written down here. I was like, I think I could, make the case to move any of these teams anywhere on this list. So, But if you're watching this and you think I'm an idiot, let me know that in the comments too. That'll be fun. So I put Green Bay first, and it's Josh Jacobs coming in, I think, is an upgrade. And then it's having Jordan Love. Like, I mean, and the weapons are pretty good. We talked about all of it. I put Chicago at number 2. And it's the upside. We haven't seen it from Caleb Williams, but I think he has the talent. I will say that I'm there with that. Like, I don't know that I think he's CJ Stroud, but I'm hopeful about what he's going to be. I have Detroit number 3 and Minnesota number 4, and I have Minnesota number 4 almost purely because of the quarterback issue. That's it. So, all right. It's kind of fun to have to try to rank them when it's really tough to do.
It really is, because it's like, when we did this and it was like, obviously the Niners are going to be the. It's like I mean, like you said, you can move these teams around anywhere, and I don't know. We'll see. It'll be interesting to see.
Yep. All right. A couple more things, and then we'll get to any best bets too. Defenses is up next.
So I'm going to go with the Bears as the number 1 defense. And same thing, struggled on this one, on the defenses as well. But when I watched what the Bears did the last 7-8 weeks of the season, I mean, you kind of talked about the Montez Sweat, trade there. When I looked at that defense, they were really freaking good. They were downright stingy and nasty those last 6, 7, 8 weeks of the season. So I've got them number 1. I gave a slight nod to the Lions at number 2. You brought up a great point on the depth. So that's something that remains to be seen. And the defense wasn't great last year. I mean, there were times when they got gashed. But when I look at that defense, I feel like this is the most complete it's been. And I feel like their ability to stop the run is going to help them rush the passer and be able to cover a little bit better. So I very, very closely put the Lions there. And then I actually bunched the Packers right below them. And the Vikings right behind them. I struggled again with that. Your Vikings mainly because of Brian Flores. I have so much, I think, respect for what he does with the defense that, I'm like, I kind of looked at that as well, whatever. I worry about, the pass rush with their front four there. I mentioned the Harrison Smith concern there in the secondary and some of that. So I went Bears, Lions, Packers, Vikings, but it's kind of the same thing. I think I would keep the Bears number one no matter what, but the other three, you could sell me on anything on the other three.
Yeah, I'm so with you. This was one of the easier things to rank to me in terms of like a team being somewhere. For me, putting the Bears at number one. I do like their defense the best in this division. After that, I agree that I could make a case lots of ways. I went actually Green Bay, Minnesota, Detroit, and had the Lions in fourth, but I would almost go Chicago and then tied for second, or something close to it if I had to. So, all right. Well, we've gone through coaching, offense, defense. Time to pick the finishing order for the NFC North, Yanni. How will these teams finish?
Flip a coin, man. This is a tough one.
Let me find one.
Just like the offenses and defenses and coaches. I mean, this is kind of a tough one. But I'm going to go Packers win the division, Lions second. I'm going to go Bears third, Vikings fourth.
And I'm going Packers win the division, Chicago second, Detroit falling back to third, and Minnesota in fourth. So
I hate to say it, man. I was trying to figure out a way to slide.
I know. I'm
like,
me too.
Maybe because I'm not a big Bears guy, but I'm just looking like, there's just too much there.
And honestly, like I go back again to the schedule. If they had the Bears schedule, I think you could find a way to make the case to move them up, but you just can't with that schedule.
And you can't understate that schedule. I mean, that is a huge difference between those two teams. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah. All right. Well, we've been through all of that, Yanni, to wrap up. And it doesn't just have to be one, but are there any kind of best bets either that you've made or that you would consider making from the NFC North?
So I like both of the rookie quarterback under yardage. We talked about Caleb Williams and JJ McCarthy for various reasons there. I think from a player standpoint, those are the two that jump out to me right away. I think there's a lot of uncertainty with a lot of the skill players in the division. So I don't know that there's a whole lot I like there. A guy I think that we want to keep an eye on would be Sam LaPorta. I mean, I can only see him, improving. I don't see him regressing. I have not seen his yardage total and his touchdowns out there, but I think that, he's a guy to keep an eye on there. As far as the bets themselves go, I like the Green Bay win total over. I don't love it. But I like it. I think that's certainly something that you can look at there. And I think the interesting thing is, with that Bears defense, it's going to be interesting to see where, early in the year, how that offense is playing, because I think people are going to see the weapons like you are, right? DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, all these different pieces. But I think this could be an under team early in the season while that offense gets some things figured out.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be week 5 or 6, they start clicking and that offense is putting 30 points up. But is that going to be the case the first month of the season with all these new pieces and all these new coordinators and moving parts in that? We know their defense is going to be pretty good. So, I look at their unders early in the year. I think that's something that you could definitely keep an eye on. And with the Lions, I always look at those overs, right? I mean, when they're on that fast turf, unless that defense is just stingy, I think overs are always in play with them. So those are some of the things I would keep my eye on.
I like that call in the Bears unders early in the season because I think there's so much hype around the offense too that I could see those numbers getting inflated a little bit. So that's a good call. I like that. Let's remember that when we get to the season, Yanni.
Right.
Another under, I haven't seen a number here, but another under I would be interested in is Aaron Jones. I think we didn't talk about this, but I think Ty Chandler is a good running back, and I think they may actually be like a 50-50 split there more than Aaron Jones as a feature back, especially with some of the injury history. So depending where that number's set, I'd be interested in an under there. In terms of other bets in the division, I like this more after our conversation tonight. I didn't actually have it as a bet before this, so I haven't made it. But that Packers over, because I think if they win the division, the winner of this division is going to win 10 games, I think. So to go over 9.5 with the team you think is going to win the division feels safer to me. Like, hey, they could still come in second. Detroit, whoever wins 11 games, you still win your bet. So I like that over. I like Detroit under 10.5 at even money. And then we talked about the Minnesota under 6.5, especially early on, and then with the chance to middle it because of that schedule. Here's the other one, and this is, I'm gonna give a little teaser for something I'll be doing hopefully later this week. But I actually took my projected wins and ran 1,000 simulations of the season with variants of like 2.5 games, and then got percentages back of where teams are likely to finish. And then from that, I put together what I think are the best futures bets out there just based on that process, not saying like, hey, I'd make all these bets. The one that came back number 4 for me is Chicago to win the division. I came back with and some of these surprised me. This is what I like about doing simulations like this, is like, that's not what I would have put that at. I came back with the correct odds based on that process to be plus 221. They're plus 375 right now, which is a 10.1% difference in implied probability. Now, do I think Chicago's going to win the division? I just said I don't. And I think having Caleb Williams at quarterback is a big question mark. But I will say at plus 375, I think they're the best value in terms of which team you would bet to win the division at the current lines. So that's actually one I'm considering, just like a unit bet, maybe. I haven't decided for sure, but that's my other one.
Okay.
All right, man. This was definitely the most fun. Way more to talk about tonight, which was great.
It's going to be a fun division to watch. I think it's going to be a fun year. I mean, even for your Vikings, like I said, I don't see them getting blown out. I think they're competitive.
Yeah.
And I think it'll be interesting, man. Normally, and I think with most of these divisions, we're going to have a consensus of, we really think, look, the Chiefs are winning the AFC West, right? Like, I mean, come on.
How dare you?
I mean, it's going to happen, right? I mean, we all hate it, but it's going to happen. But it's like, these are so much fun, though, where you literally are like, man, I could see the Bears stay. I could see the Lions. I could see the Packers. Yeah, it's just, these are the fun ones. I mean, they really are. And obviously, it forces you to really dig in, which I think, obviously when the week-to-week bets come up, I think that really helps you because you've got a nice head start on what you're seeing with these teams.
Yeah, I love it. All right, that wraps up the NFC North. Next week, or in the next couple weeks, we will wrap up the NFC with the NFC South. Yanni, appreciate your expertise on kicking these things around as always. Have a good night, and we'll look forward to the next one.
A lot of fun, man. Thanks for having me.